is now recognized.
Hey, thank you. I was going to say Chairman Hill, but Chairman Barr. I know Chairman Hill's got a markup. Mr. Chairman, I do have to at least address one thing. My family business, third generation sand and gravel operation, was brought up, and I guess I would just note that I'm glad I'm not a publicly traded company and not subject to a bunch of ESG woke activists from California coming in and trying to tell me how to dig dirt. But not every company has that same fortunate position. But I do want to thank the committee and Chairman Hill for continuing to highlight the abuses that happened under the leadership of former SEC Chair Gary Gensler, who allowed and frankly encouraged activist investors to hijack the shareholder process and push a social agenda that ultimately harmed publicly traded companies and their investors. By some estimates, under the Biden-run SEC, these environmental, social, and political proposals grew by almost 60%. I'm proud of the work of the ESG working group, as you had just noted, and what we had done. And many of the issues that, exact issues that we've talked about already today were explored by that committee. Lastly, I think it's crucial that the committee continue to explore and hold the proxy advisor firms accountable. The outsized influence of Glass Lewis and ISS have harmed the shareholder process. These proxy advisory firms bear none of the consequences their recommendations have, and have even fought against exact proposals when it applied to them that they encouraged to be applied to other publicly traded companies. They operate without sufficient transparency and have become the de facto standard settlers for corporate governance policies in the U.S. And as chairman, I was happy to see them testify before our oversight committee last Congress, and I think we should continue to hold them accountable, encourage them to be more transparent, especially as they navigate conflicts of interest in the firms that they supposedly serve. Mr. Copeland, I want to start with you. A lot has happened since the first time you came in front of our committee in 2016. The issue of proxy voting and shareholder proposals has become somewhat of a political football, to say the least, as shifts in policy have flipped back and forth. How has the volume and nature of the shareholder proposals changed over the past decade? And are you seeing more proposals focused on specific social or political issues? And have we been able, through our work here in Congress, have we been able to maybe curb some of that and influence the impact of those?
Well, the short answer is the volume's increased significantly up until this year, and we've seen a decrease this year. I do think that the
regime change, I think it happened.
I think the regime change, and from the SEC going from 14L to 14M, has made a difference. But in terms of how these have been received, I mean, certainly as Mr. Mueller sort of talked about in his opening statement, we've seen up until recently, a substantial uptick in the number of social and environmental proposals. When I started tracking this 15 years ago, there were still a fair number of them, but they were a much smaller percentage. The other
it's
thing
really
is,
exploded.
Yeah, and when I first testified, it's not the first time I testified in front of this committee, but on this subject matter specifically in 2016, I could say no shareholder proposals ever gotten majority shareholder votes over board opposition at the Fortune 250. That switched shortly after that in 2017, and you started seeing more of these, and that reflects the change in voting pattern from the voting advice from the proxy advisory firms and voting pattern from the big three. So
passive index investors have been brought up or at least alluded to, and they seem to have scaled back some of the support for ESG proposals. However, the proxy advisory firms can swing approximately a third sometimes of those types of votes. As a committee, we've discussed bills such as the Index Act and My Empowering Shareholders Act as a solution, which would, I think, de-emphasize their influence. Should large brokerage firms continue to move towards empowering individual investors?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I don't think the uptick is going to be huge from it, so I do like something like the mirror voting that the Index Act that Senator Sullivan originally introduced does on that. I explained it more in my written testimony and in the paper I wrote last year that I.
We'll follow up. And Mrs. Keel, I want to, last moment, I'm going to have to follow up in writing. I wanted to know, resource-wise, the impact that these proxy advisory firms have on the SEC. And we'll submit a question. I want to talk about Toyota in particular. So
Gentleman's
with that,
time's
I yield back.
expired.